Hi everyone, it is Thursday and I'm doing another Pam Chat. And today I'm going to talk very specifically about the amendments on Florida's ballot. As you can tell, I just recently did a Pam Chat, and you're going to notice over the next weeks that these Pam Chats are going to come maybe a little bit more frequently than you're used to. A, I have a little bit more time, but B, I also think that there's so many things going on just nationally that I want to chime in on. And if you like what you hear, please make sure that you share these Pam Chats, but more than anything, subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's right. I have a YouTube channel that's going to be archiving all of these Pam Chats that I've done over these many years now, that I'm slowly uploading into that Pam channel. It's called Pam Chats on Politics. Now, don't get confused with Pam Chats. That's out there too. That was sort of an interim step until I could figure out how to do all the technical things to get these Pam Chats actually into archived. Now, right now they're just kind of going in as I'm able to do them. Pretty soon I'm going to be able to archive them and do specific playlists on topics. So you'll be able to find chats on gun reform or education or healthcare or whatever. So you'll be able to kind of see my thoughts on these issues grouped by topic after a while. And then I'm going to go back into some of these Pam Chats and I'm going to actually start editing them and doing nice special things with that. But I'm learning how to do that. That is not an expertise that I currently have, but I am learning. So that's kind of excited. Also, please stay tuned for the new Pam podcast, which is coming. It's in the works. It's coming. But if you're a person who likes to listen to these Pam Chats but is busy or is commuting and wants to be able to just listen to them as a podcast, we're working to make that happen too. So that is what is happening. There's so much happening right now in Florida. Before I get to our ballot and to talk about the amendments, I really want to send my love and my thoughts and my prayers and all of my best wishes to the people up in the Big Bend part of our state. This is a part of state that I've actually been to when I was campaigning for U.S. Senate. I've been to Apalachicola. I've been to Mexico Beach. I've been to, all of Escambia County, all up there in the Panhandle. So it particularly breaks my heart to see what has been done to that area. It has been absolutely devastated by a storm that was way stronger than people thought it was going to be. But it was sort of like the perfect circumstances for the storm to intensify right before it hit ground because the Gulf water temperatures were abnormally high. They were 2 or 3 degrees higher than they normally are, which you would ask, why was the Gulf waters warmer? The waters all over the world seem to be warmer, and our sea levels are rising, but the water temperature is also rising. And all of that is the downstream consequence of climate change and the trapping of gases in our atmosphere, which is creating what we call, global warming. That's what's happening. And so these once in a lifetime storms are happening all the time. So they're not once in a lifetime anymore. They're kind of now the new normal, which is having catastrophic and devastating effects, and not just on the people in the Panhandle, mind you, right? Not just on the people in Florida. We all end up paying in small and big ways when FEMA has to come to the rescue, when we have to bail out our brothers and sisters who don't have flood insurance. These storms are going to start to hit in places they're not expected, and people are not prepared for them. This is the first time that a storm this big has ever hit the Panhandle, ever. So again, it's not like you can prepare for something like this if it never happens to you. Again, this is the consequence of Mother Nature saying she's angry, and she's angry because we keep mistreating her. And we have to move in a different direction. And I just have zero tolerance for any politician who's now saying that global warming is a hoax. It's not a freaking hoax. It may be an inconvenient truth to the profits of oil, gas, and coal companies. Yes, it is an inconvenient truth to polluters, but it's nevertheless a truth that we all should come to accept and understand. So, absolutely, positively, vote out any person that will not step up and take action on climate change. And that means moving to solar and clean and renewable energy. That means reducing our carbon footprint. That means higher emission standards for our cars and light trucks. That means more commuter rail and so forth. And it also absolutely means modification of our own behavior patterns, which is sometimes hard for us to accept, that we're going to have to do some things differently to make our planet more healthier and sustainable for our children and our grandchildren, right? That's absolutely critical that we do that. And we got to be less selfish about this. I'm sorry, we just have to be. I did get a quick question. The reason I do these Facebook Lives and then I save them and then put them on YouTube is because the live component of this is very important. I know that I'm talking to some people, even if it's just a handful. Hi, Abdur and Cindy and Carol. Hi, guys. I'm so glad you're watching, but that component of me talking to someone is very critical to how this thing works for me because it is natural and it's organic, but it happens in a moment. And so I'm so glad that you all are tuning in to make this work for me. As I am talking to you, notice that I am not watching TV and I am not watching Twitter. I know that Kanye West was at the Oval Office. Somebody just asked me about that. I don't care. One of the people in that room is stupid and one of the people in that room is crazy. You figure out which is which. Honestly, I don't care what either one of those people have to say, I'll be honest with you. Kanye West is not a savant of any flavor, He's just a guy who craves attention as badly as the other guy in that room. And so he doesn't mind being shocking to get attention. The thing is, he tries to couch his shockingness as being countercultural, like he's going against the stream. He doesn't even understand the stream. Right? He doesn't understand. He's not erudite. He's not well-read. He's not thoughtful. He just likes to be contrarian. I had a grandfather like that, who liked to just say shocking things to be contrarian. And we just kind of shrugged him off. That's kind of how I feel about this dude, Kanye West. Just shrug him off. He's just saying stuff to be contrarian, but he's not a thoughtful or deep person. He used to be a good artist. He's not even that anymore. So I just kind of leave him to what he is. And I do think that, he has a history of mental illness, and I am not knocking people with mental illness at all. But I think he tries to self-medicate. That's my personal opinion. And when he is off in La La Land, he is not somebody that we need to pay a whole lot of attention to. The reason this is getting the kind of media attention it is because he's a celebrity, and we currently live in a time when celebrities are automatically given attention because they're just titillating. It's like watching a car crash. And second of all, because he's black, and people think that he speaks for black people because at one point in time, he was popular with black people. He's not popular with black people anymore. He doesn't speak for black people anymore. I don't know why they think he does. Most black folk wouldn't be caught dead wearing a MAGA hat. And he only does it to get a rise out of people. So if you feel like that's something that, you want to do, cool. But I'm just not interested in that. So let me get to the topic of the day. I want to talk about the ballot. Mine is here. I love when my ballot comes. It's so exciting. I'm going to talk about the amendments today, and I want to talk about them from a structural standpoint before I dig into any particular one. If you haven't got your ballots yet, and you don't vote by mail, okay. First of all, I recommend that you do vote by mail. It is a whole lot more convenient. Tell all your friends and family to vote by mail. Do keep in mind that it's $1.24 postage to vote by mail. I actually can afford $1.24, just barely, and so I'm going to vote by mail. But the reason I like to do this is because I like to take my time with the ballot. I like to read and research and do my stuff. And once it's done, I know it's done. I can make sure that it's been counted online, and then I can spend all of my energy and my time getting other people to vote, which is what I plan to do. Now, I want to talk about amendments, but before I do that, I want to talk generally about constitutions. We have a national constitution, the Constitution of the United States of America. It's very cool. It's an imperfect document, but it's a heck of a good structure of a government. It's survived for 200 and some years, but what it is, a constitution fundamentally is about foundational principles of how a unit is going to function. That's what a constitution is really meant to be. The United States Constitution has a lot of stuff in it, but mostly it's about how an individual relates to the government, how the states relate to each other, how the state relates to the federal government, and all of these sort of how this machine is going to work. And that's really what a state constitution ought to be as well. It should be a foundational document about how the state is going to function. So basic civil rights that are inured to the people of the state should be in a constitution. How municipalities relate to the state legislature, that should be in the Constitution. How the judges and the courts in the state function, that should be in the Constitution. Certain powers or certain cabinets and departments, that should be in the Constitution. How they levy taxes, all of that should be in the Constitution. Those things make sense to be in a Constitution. But as with many things, stuff in Florida does not make sense. Because our Constitution has now become more than just a document full of foundational concepts. It's a document full of everything that doesn't get through the regular legislative process. That's what it has now become too. Let me talk about that for a hot minute. We have 3 methods in Florida to get something to be on our Constitution. The first method, and I think personally, the only one that's really legitimate, is the petition method. Now, you all are familiar with this method. You are required to get a showing of interest by a certain number of people. Usually it's in excess of 1 million, right? You got to get signatures from all over the state. You got to send them to the Secretary of State of Florida. They verify that the signatures are legitimate. And when you pass a certain threshold within a certain time frame, you put that measure onto the ballot. But before it gets there, it has to pass a judicial review to make sure that it's written in a way that's understandable and blah, blah, blah. There's usually challenges and blah, blah, blah. In other words, it is very difficult to get something onto a ballot through the petition method. And then you have to have 60% approval to get it into law, onto the Constitution. So again, way expensive and burdensome and difficult. And so you would think that this is the method that the state honors the most. You'd be wrong about that. Because what tends to happen here in Florida is we go through all these machinations and then we pass a constitutional amendment, and then, the legislature that's in power decides it's just not going to implement what the people demanded. Like Amendment 1, for example, or the marijuana amendment. Okay? So, but that's method number 1. Method number 2 is that the legislature can put something up for a vote to be part of the Constitution. The legislature itself can do that. But when it does that, there's a limitation. It can only be one question at a time. It cannot put several different questions together to get them onto the ballot. Okay? Then there's this third method. And of course, it is so Floridian. It happens every 20 years. We call it the Constitutional Revision Committee. Every 20 years, they look at the governor appoints a panel of people to look at the Constitution and add things to it. I don't know if they can subtract things from it, but they can clarify and whatever. They can do some stuff. But because it's appointed by the governor, you should not be surprised that it tends to be quite partisan. Right? Now, it wasn't always as partisan as it is now, but it has always been somewhat of a partisan process. The governor will appoint people, the majority of the people on that panel will be from the party that the governor, the governor's own party. And then by tradition or by rule, I'm not exactly sure, the governor will appoint some people from the other party too. And so this becomes something that certain kind of pet projects can be dealt with through this process. And what's unique about the CRC process is that it is the only process in which they can actually bundle disparaging topics together into one amendment, which they do. Now, I want to give you some sort of political situational awareness. Stay with me here, okay? We know that the legislature and the gubernatorial seat has been in Republican hands for 20 years, right? For 20 solid years. So let me ask you something. Why would they need to use the constitutional amendment process to pass a piece of legislation? Why would they need that? They have the House, they have the Senate, and they have the gubernatorial seat. Why couldn't they just do it through the regular legislative process? The answer is because some of their own pet projects are unpopular in their own caucus. Now, you can understand why Democrats would take this rare opportunity to try to get some of their pet projects onto the Constitution, right? Because they don't have the votes in the regular legislative process to get those things across the line. And so therefore, they try to do it through the constitutional amendment process. I actually can understand that. Especially when there are things that they can't get out of committee, but there are things that are popular, wildly popular amongst the voters. They say, hey, this is the hill we can die on here if we only get a few things through the CRC. So if you're the minority party, you push the things that you think you're going to get the most support for. But if you're the majority party, you push the things that you know you couldn't get any other way. which makes you beg the question, why are these things so unpopular? And that's what I want you to keep in mind as you're looking through these amendments. I'm going to go through them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to go through them because I think we need to talk about them. And there's several of them here that make no sense. But before you do anything, you need to know which process an amendment went through to get on the ballot in the first place, because that's going to tell you a lot about how jaundiced you should be looking at it. That's going to tell you a lot. The one that I know on my ballot that went through the petition process is Amendment 4. And that is the voting restoration amendment. That is the one that went through the regular petitioning process. I know the person who initiated this petition. I know the groups that worked with him on it. I full-throated support Amendment 4. It is voting rights restorations for returning citizens who've completed their debt to society and get their voting rights back. Now, you guys who follow these Pam Chats have heard me talk about Amendment 4 in the past, so I'm not going to talk about it again. Just vote yes on 4, period. That's all you need to know, and tell everybody you know to vote yes on 4. Now, as a simple and basic rule of thumb, I would feel comfortable telling you to vote yes on 4 and no on everything else. I feel comfortable telling you that. But I'm going to tell you that I'm going to go through some of these and to explain to you why I'm no on these things, even if they sound like really good ideas. The first thing I'm going to tell you as a foundational principle is I do not believe in using the Constitution revision process to deal with things that should be dealt with in basic legislation. I just don't. And even if you're not the party in power, when you put something in the Constitution, you hamstring future legislative bodies. And I do believe that someday we're going to have the Democratic Florida House and Florida Senate someday. I don't know when, but we are. And so I don't want to hamstring them in the future. So I started with 4, yes on 4. Now I just got a question on yes, and I'm no, on 6, and I said I am no on 6, and let me tell you why. And I did say this once in a Pam chat before. Amendment 6 went through the CRC. Again, be suspicious of anything that came through the CRC. 6 is what? It's called Macy's Law, right? This about victims' rights. I'm for victims' rights, and about making sure that they have the right to be notified when the people who hurt them get out of jail. Makes perfect sense to me. You would be surprised. First, I was like, well, is this already not the law in the state of Florida? And as I started digging on that, I kind of found out that, yeah, mostly it is actually already the law in the state of Florida. But they felt like they needed more protections and that it needed to be enshrined in the Constitution. And so then I was like, okay, well, the Republicans agreed with this. Okay, well, let me look at it. And guess what? Amendment 6 is not about one topic. It's about 3 topics, 3 unrelated topics, right? Macy's Law is part 1. Part 2 is about the retirement age of judges from 70 to 75. Now, I'm not into age discrimination. At first blush, that seems like, yeah, why not? But then again, if you have judges on the bench much longer, fewer new judges get in. And the people who come into power have the ability to appoint fewer judges. Think on that. So I'm not sure I want to change that. And then the third part, and that's the real kicker. The third part is about prioritizing state law over administrative interpretations, right? Administrative body interpretations. But what administrative body interpretations are you referring to? And this is where Amendment 6 is toxic. Right here, because this is a Koch brothers dream amendment, right? This is about putting state laws that they now have much more control over because of the GOP control of Florida over the interpretations of administrative bodies, including things like the EPA and the Department of Health and Human Services. Like, they want state law to trump federal law because federal administrations interpret federal law. And they apply federal law nationally. So this is a way of making state law, which is easier to control and manipulate through direct financial dark money contributions, than federal law. No, sir. Absolutely not. So unfortunately, we all have to say no to 6. No. This is a backdoor way for the Koch brothers to get something over on you that you would never choose to vote for in any other circumstance. That's how shady this is. Now, somebody asked me about dog racing. I want to read this provision on dog racing. We're jumping around a little bit, but I want you to understand how some of these things are written. I think that one's either 11 or 12. Which one is? 13. It's 13. Ends dog racing is the title on my ballot. Ends dog racing. And it says phases out commercial dog racing in connection with wagering by 2020. Other gaming activities are not affected. Now, I want you to understand something. First of all, as a principal, I am not against gaming generally. I'm not gambling. It's not my thing. But I did actually work in a casino for a while. I was a blackjack dealer. Some of you didn't know that about me. For a summer, I dealt blackjack at Caesars in Lake Tahoe. It's not Caesars anymore, but that was many, many years ago. But I'm not a big fan of gambling. But I also am not a puritanical. If people want to gamble, gamble. But let me ask you something so you can understand where I'm coming from. If a football game takes place in Miami, the Miami Dolphins play the New England Patriots, is all the wagering on that game taking place in Florida? Absolutely not. Nowadays, wagering is not a state thing. It's a national and international thing. If you got an internet, you can bet on anything, right? Of course. Right. Now, the theory here is that if you stop the wagering on dog racing, you stop the dog racing. That's the theory, right? And nobody would support a ban on dog racing more than me, because I hate dog racing. I think it's inhumane. I don't like it. But does this actually say it stops dog racing? Well, that's what the title says, but I don't think that's what the language of the actual provision says. What it does is it stops wagering on dog racing in our state, which would theoretically stop the dog racing, right? Theoretically. But it doesn't actually say make it illegal to raise dogs and race them. It does not say that. So again, this is a very strange way to write legislation to stop a behavior. The behavior we want to stop is the dog racing, the dog abuse, the raising of dogs for racing, the selling of dogs for racing. That's the behavior we want to stop. And somehow this provision only talks about wagering. Isn't that weird? That's weird to me. Anyway, so again, that's another one that I'm going to use two basic principles not to agree with. Principle number one, is this a foundational principle about the state of Florida? No, it's not. Dog racing is not something that should be in our Constitution. If you had a provision about animal rights generally, okay, maybe. But this ain't something that belongs in our Constitution. And number two, this addresses wagering without addressing the trafficking in dogs, without addressing the abuse of dogs, without addressing puppy mills and stuff like that, which is really what we were trying to get at in the first place. So again, this ain't the way to do this. As much as I support the theory, I don't support the practice here. This does not make sense to me. Again, another one that does this for me, that raises these questions, like, where are you going with this? There's one about giving the people the right to vote down casinos. Which one was that? I forget. I think that was one of the early ones. Hold on. Which one was that? I think that is the voter control. That's number 3. Voter control of gambling in Florida. Okay. Yeah. Let me ask you something. Why is this necessary? And who's supporting it? You know who's supporting this provision? Disney. That's weird. Why would Disney care about voter control of gambling? Because gambling operations compete with Disney for patrons. That's why. So what are the main gambling casinos in Florida? The one that I know I'm most familiar with is the Hard Rock in Broward. I know there's some gambling casinos in North Florida. And I know there's one somewhere in Southwest Florida. Most of those casinos are actually on Indian tribe lands, because the tribes have absolute power to build casinos on their land. And not only do they have that right, but that revenue is money that they use for the tribe members. So why would we want to give the state of Florida voters the ability to say yes or no to those operations? Wouldn't that conflict with the sovereign rights of the tribes? Well, absent an answer to that particular question, I am voting no on number 3. Because this seems to me like a way to get around the tribal rights of the landowners of the Native American tribes in our state. That's what it comes off. And not only that, but that creates a conflict between state and federal law, which, by the way, we'd end up as taxpayers paying for once it gets litigated in court. We'd send our state attorney and pay all these fees to litigate this. And to me, this is a stupid thing. This makes no sense to me. I always want to have voters have control. But you know what? Control over whom is what I want to know. And this is another one where I'm totally suspicious of the intentions of the people who wrote this. So I'm no on 3. Okay? Taxation. 2/3 majority. There's another one on here on taxes. And that we need a 2/3 majority to raise taxes. Always say no to that. Always say no to that. And that's simply because keeping taxes low is a GOP priority. But good schools and clean rivers and clean water and infrastructure and all these other things are priorities for us. So I don't want to put our priorities in a situation where we'll never be able to fund them. That's stupid. No to that. So I think at the end of the day, I'm struggling. There's one other one that I thought was worth raising to you, and it's about the offshore drilling. Okay, that's one that I could, and it's again another one of these CRC ones that has offshore drilling and vaping in the same thing. Now I'm no fan of vaping. I'm no fan of cigarettes. Anybody who knows me knows that is one of my 3 pet topics that I loathe. I loathe cigarettes just like everything in me loathes cigarettes. So, but offshore drilling and vaping, and again, I don't like that provision because, again, I am very suspicious of the intentions of the people who put these on here, especially the way they bundle them. So, but if you feel like you could get behind this ban on offshore drilling, okay, I will tell you this. The first thing that comes to my mind when I look at this is once you get beyond a certain territory, you're out of littoral waters, right? This now becomes federally controlled. So I'm not even sure that this is worth the paper it's written on. But if you want to vote for that one, okay. So here's my basic rule of thumb here, okay? And I hope you understand why I'm coming at it this way. And maybe it makes sense to you, right? I'm going to vote yes on 4, no question about that. And I'm going to vote no on everything else. Why? Because either it can be dealt with in a better way. It's not foundational to our state. It's designed to dupe us or get us to agree to in part to something we do want by accepting something we clearly do not want. Was put on by a CRC panel appointed by a guy who's desperate to extend his power beyond the reign of his own gubernatorialship. And I also feel like there is a better way to get most of these things done. Right? And so again, I just find nothing that recommends these provisions to me because I don't think they belong in a constitution and I don't think that they've been put there in the proper way. Does that make sense? I hope you understand where I'm coming from. Now, I am not telling you that you have to agree with me. I'm simply telling you how I am interpreting this and why I'm voting the way that I am. It should be no secret to you that I am voting for Democrats. That should be no secret to you. But some of you may have some of the same judge candidates on your ballot as I do. And there's a local referendum about raising taxes for schools, and I'm going to be supporting that. That's right here in Palm Beach Gardens. But there are some judges that are up for retention, and I am voting to retain all of them on my ballot. There are a couple that are shady in other parts of the state, but they're not in my part of the state. So I'm voting to retain all the judges on my ballot. And as for the judges that are up for election, as between Alcolia, St. Just, and Scott Kerner, I am choosing Alcolia. Anytime I get an opportunity to put a woman there, I'm going to. I'm just letting you know why. I just am. Alcolia Alcolia is absolutely qualified for the gig, and I've met her. I've met Scott too, and I have nothing against him. It's not a vote against Scott. It is definitely a vote for Alcolia, and I think she deserves an opportunity. Between Maxine Cheeseman and Maribel Reynoso Coleman, I know I have like I said, no beef with either one of them. I have met Maxine. I've had some great conversations with her, so I'm choosing Maxine Cheeseman. Between Sarah Willis and Michael McAuliffe, this ought to surprise you maybe. I'm choosing Michael McAuliffe. I think his background is a little bit more varied and a little bit broader. He may actually come from a slightly more conservative bent, but I like the way he answered things a little bit better than Sarah. Although, again, nothing against Sarah, nothing personal. I have no knock on her. If she's your candidate, fabulous. I think she'd make a good judge too. Between Allegra Fung and Ashley Zuckerman, I'm leaning Zuckerman. Like I said, I read what she had to say. Zuckerman was more impressive to me personally. Oh, again, Allegra Fung, I met her only one time out in Jupiter Farms. And she seemed perfectly qualified too, but again, I got a better feeling from Zuckerman. And then between David Legg, Michelle Sylvester, and Ian Wellinghurst for Soil and Water. Ian's definitely got my vote. I'm supporting him. Mark Beaumont has my vote over Eva Webb. And Jim Gibbs should get your vote. He is a stalwart, and he helps everybody. And it's absolutely our duty to stand with him, given how many people he has stood with over the years. I think he'd be a great person in that role. I think he would take it seriously. And so definitely, if Jim Gibbs is on your ballot, vote for Jim Gibbs. Okay, now, I've talked for a while. I hope this has been helpful for you to frame what's going on with these constitutional amendments. I know that they're confusing, and they say a lot of different stuff. I mean, once, the throwaway phrase, it's like the whole kit and caboodle is in this little clause over here. And so I just be very, very suspicious, because this process is a suspicious process. It is controlled by people who have a certain agenda to push through things that that they can't get through the normal method, especially if they can't get it through their own caucuses, which is bizarre. I did get a question here about Alan Lawson. Yes, retain him. I'm going to say yes on Lawson. I did do actually my research on him. I read up on him, and he seems like he well qualified, and I have not seen anything that's like a major red flag for him. So that is where I am. I hope this was a helpful Pam Chat to you. I am going to be doing these Pam Chats more frequently, and I am asking you personally to take a moment and go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Pam Chats on Politics. It only takes a hot minute to do it. If you do it, it really, really helps me to get out to a broader audience. So please do it, and ask a friend. Take a personal initiative to ask a friend, ask a colleague, send an email to your list, call some folks and say, hey, go subscribe to Pam Keith's channel, Pam Keith Chats on Politics. The more people I get on that channel, the better. I sincerely appreciate your willingness to help me out in this way. And if you have a topic that you want me to cover, I'm glad to do it. This is my effort at getting into this sort of punditry world, and I think I have something to add, and if you agree, please share it with your friends. That's enough for today. Stay tuned. I will be doing more of these. And if you think this was helpful, please let me know. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Stay tuned. The work to get Democrats elected in 2018 continues. We do not back down. We do not go away. We do not let ourselves get frustrated. We do not let ourselves get fatigued, because that's how the other side wins. They wear us down, make us feel like we have no power, when the opposite is true. As much as they keep us up at night, trust and believe that we keep them up at night too. Cheers.